Hi, welcome to Dr. Lisa Sulsenti's podcast. I'm Dr. Lisa, and today we are going to be talking about a topic that affects millions of people, especially women as we age, but it often doesn't get enough attention until it becomes serious or it's a problem facing you head on, and that topic is osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is often called the silent disease because bone loss happens quietly without symptoms usually, and again, it doesn't really, you don't really know that you're going through it or you have it until maybe a fracture occurs or it smacks you right in the face. So my goal today is to help you understand what osteoporosis is, why it happens, who's at risk, how we do the testing, and what you can do to protect your bones before it happens or at any age here. It's osteoporosis in general means porous bones. It's a condition where bones lose density and strength, making them more fragile and more likely to break. So think of healthy bones like a strong honeycomb structure, like the beehive structure, or like a sponge. And with osteoporosis, the honeycomb becomes thin and brittle. So a minor fall, even coughing or twisting, can cause a fracture. Or you can think of a sponge, and it's got all those porous holes in it like a sponge. And if you left the sponge, not wet, if it dried out and got brittle and fractured. Common fracture sites include the hip, the spine, the wrist. Hip fractures in particular can be life-challenging, especially in older adults, of course. Bone itself is living tissue. And this, I think, is really important because if you're not in the science world, you might be like, I didn't even know that. What does that even mean? Inside the bone, you've got bone marrow, you've got blood cells, you've got all this stuff going on inside, collagen, all this stuff going on inside the bones. It's constantly breaking down old bone and building new bone. Kind of like skin. We're constantly breaking down the skin cells. So you have these cells in there called osteoblasts and osteoclasts. When you're young, you build more bone than you lose. You're constantly building new bones. And actually, when you're really young, you know how you have growth plates and all that stuff. And then that comes together as a solid adult bone. Peak bone mass is usually reached in your early 20s or 30s. And after that, you slowly stop, building more bone. And you can just think of it, your bones grow, right? Quote, grow. Usually they say it's about age 25. And then after your 30s, that whole process is going to slow down, right? And several factors can affect this. As you're aging, bone loss can be caused by many things. So it's not just a calcium problem. And that's what I want to address today. It's not that vitamin D and calcium aren't important. It's just not the only cause. And it's usually not effective in treatments because we can see plenty of people that are given medications or given calcium and vitamin D and they still fracture. So that's in the studies. You can see that. There's other factors you want to think about when it comes to bone loss. Declining estrogen after menopause is actually a problem. Hormonal imbalances in general is an issue. Low minerals. So that's calcium, magnesium, zinc, boron, phosphorus, things like that. So a lot of the minerals are very important in this story and often neglected. Vitamin D obviously is the main vitamin, but K is very important as well. So they work beautifully together. K depends and D depend tremendously on the gut. So gut health would be the next one that is super, super important. You want a healthy gut so you can absorb these nutrients, but as I get into this, you're going to see that K and D are actually dependent on the gut microbiome. So if you have a poor gut microbiome or your gut isn't absorbing or functioning well, this could be one of the problems. Poor protein intake, if you're just not eating enough protein. Inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of osteoporosis. So again, functional medicine is going to say what's causing the inflammation, what's the root cause, how can we fix this? So if you have chronic inflammation going on for years, and this could be, again, an illness that you have, something chronic that you have, you haven't gotten down to the root cause of it, that's something you want to do. Thyroid, definitely causes some bone loss. Hormonal imbalances will affect bone loss. Obviously, all the arthritises do, but your gut, your chronic, Crohn's and celiac and diverticulitis and all that stuff. So chronic inflammation. Sedentary lifestyle is a big one. I would say that's another one to really consider. And we tend to do that as we get older. And it's a catch-22 because your bones start hurting and then it's harder to work out. You get life challenges, it gets harder. But sedentary lifestyle really contributes. And I want to challenge that one in a minute. I'm going to come back to that one. Smoking, excessive alcohol, toxic overload, living in a toxic, environment, eating, what you drink, what you put on your skin, how you live your life really affects osteoporosis. Medications actually can cause bone loss, especially steroids, overuse of steroids, and then gut issues that we talked about. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I do want to address before going on, because this gets into really some great parts. I want to come back to sedentary lifestyle. If you haven't watched, I think it's on Netflix. Don't quote me on that, but it's The Blue Zones. And if you have, you're nodding your head. This is a really interesting documentary. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because if you go to these zones, it's certain zones across the world where there's a community of people that live past 100. And they're called centurions. And 100, 115, I think the oldest might have been 115 or 118, can't remember, but they're over 100. And they look at these communities and there's many people, and they go to the people in the documentary and they want to figure out what is going on in this community that so many people can live long. And when you meet the people in the community, you watch the documentary, they're active, I guess elderlies, if you want to call them, they're not sickly. And they don't have sedentary lifestyles. They eat healthy. They eat off the land. They eat very clean. They eat, when I say off the land, I mean what God made. They eat the vegetables. They eat fruit. They eat real food. They're not in these communities where they're doing, food stores, Costco, American poisoned food products. They're eating very healthy and they're very active. That's the part that I want to play, because I don't think the American lifestyle has this. Now, I'm going to challenge you one step further, and you might say, well, maybe it's a documentary. My sons go to Japan a lot. They love Japan, and they want me to go because they said, Mom, you would absolutely love it because it fits everything you talk about. It's just you. My sons weren't really into, they eat healthy, but they also don't, right? And they weren't really into, I noticed, I guess worrying about what they eat and drink and being active and, they're active kids, but they weren't really as into it until their first trip to Japan. And they came back and I saw they got more active. They got more outdoorsy. They started paying attention to what they eat. And I said, what happened? Because I've been talking about this your whole life. And it perplexed me. And I'm really, really into human behavior. I like to watch behaviors and why did they do that? Why is that person thinking? So of course I was like, why are you guys all of a sudden getting this? And they said, Mom, we went out to Japan and there were people older than you, 70, right? And my kids are in their 20s and they were kicking our butts, walking up these hills if they wanted to go to a restaurant that was up on a hill, or they wanted to go look at some kind of tourist attraction. And they said that they were walking everywhere, up and down hills. They eat super, super real foods out there, real fresh. And he said they took pictures of me of the 7-Elevens type stores that were all bento fresh boxes and everything's fresh. There's no, they couldn't, it was, even the McDonald's they went to, I think used real chicken or something. I don't even know, but it was crazy. But what caught their eye was these elder people's kicking their butt when they were walking. If they're walking the road or they're walking up hills, they were getting beat. And they were there's something here. And then they even saw people in the fields, elder people, gardening, and they all squat. Everyone squats in Japan. They never, like we in America, we try to get down at 55, 6 years old on our knees to play on the floor with your grandkids, and you're like, your knees are crunching. It hurts, right? If you were to try to sit on your knees, you're like, ow. He's like, no, they squat on everything. So you got to see like a different lifestyle, a more active, up and down, on the floor. They sleep on the floor. They have these futons that are very low. We'd be like, we're in recliners, and you're like, wait. We are doing something wrong. And that's what the kid said. We're doing it wrong. Now, I know about the Japanese diet. I didn't really think about the lifestyle as much. And that really hit me. And they're not osteoporotic. They're not to be able to do this. Like they're in their gardens, he said, squatting, pulling the plants out, and they're like 80 years old, So you really got to think when you think of osteoporosis is how active is your lifestyle? Are you challenging the bones? Because when you challenge the bones, you are challenging what I'm about to talk to you about, the osteoclast and the osteoblast balance. There's a dance between these two. These are immune cells, and the blasts are going to build more bone, and the clasts are going to break them down. And there's a fine dance between these two, or you can say a seesaw. I always like to think about like a seesaw. And one of the things that challenges this balance between these these seesaws, is exercise. Active, challenging the bones. The osteoclasts is what I'm going to get into, like what's going on here in osteoporosis. The osteoclasts are the bones that are known to absorb the bone tissue. So we call them, like, they're breaking bone down. They're absorbing it, and the blasts are building. So they're forming, and it might be confusing, but the way they're immune system cells, and the way you want to look at it is I guess you can get into the big medical terms with this, but just think of the osteoblasts are bone building cells. So they're going to form bone, right? They're going to build bone. They're specialized cells in the bone themselves, and they add bone tissue. So I just call them bone building cells. And then the osteoclasts, I call them the cells that are going to break down bone. But really what they're doing is they're reabsorbing it. And as I said before, when you're younger, the blasts are kind of like in full production. They're youthful. They're energetic like you, like when you're young, and they're building more bone. As you get older, this whole thing slows down. And unfortunately, the osteoclasts, they kind of still do their reabsorption. So we can get a really big imbalance sometimes as we get older between the blasts and the clasts. And that's really what osteoporosis is. We're taught that it's a calcium deficiency, honestly, or a vitamin D deficiency, and that's kind of the message that we get. But it's really an immune system imbalance between the immune cells and the bones. And some of it happens naturally, but when you look at a place like Japan, they don't really have it as prevalent as we do. So you have to say to yourself, what are we doing? What are we causing? Like, we're functional medicine. Like, why do we have osteoporosis? What could we do to prevent it? What are some of the things that, I might not be doing or doing? Now, women, when you hit menopause, and I'm there, I'm telling you, it's real. I mean, it's real. I was hoping that I would be different because I was like, oh, I'm really healthy. It's a real deal. When estrogen drops, the skin starts sagging. When estrogen drops, you definitely get that little menopause belly. You definitely start feeling certain things. The brain fog comes in a little bit. The hot flashes. You don't get all of these. You might get all of them. I felt my bones hurting. That was actually my first sign, and I didn't realize it. I was like, oh my gosh, because I'm a runner, and it was my feet started hurting. My feet. And I'm telling you, when women come in and they're like 48 years old, they're like, I don't know, my doc, my feet hurt. My feet hurt. I'm like, it's the estrogen. what happens is the bones, the osteoclast and the osteoblast really depend on estrogen. And it sucks, really, honestly. I wish this wasn't true because you lose this. I'm losing my active lifestyle because of several things. And I've got to, and it's a bit depressing. I told my husband the other day, I got to get to this mental place where I figure this out. And it has to be an older me, a more active me, but I've got to figure it out. And this is what I'm challenging you guys today to do. And this is what I'm going to walk you through to the end of this podcast, is how to figure this out because it's a real deal. So when the estrogen starts leaving, you're going to feel bone pain. You might feel joint pain. If you have a thyroid issue, which I do, you might feel joint pain as well, which makes it harder to be active, which makes it harder to bend down or to jog, right? So I might now have to be like, in the last several years, I had also a different health issue, which was more of a female pelvic floor type thing, and running was really not doing well for it at the time, and neither was spinning. So it took somebody who was a jogger, kept my whole entire health perfect, everything was great, and then I hit a bump in the road with some pelvic stuff, and then I just couldn't exercise the way I was, and then I kind of let myself go. And that's not good, because if I stay on the track I'm on, I'm going to have this. There's no doubt, because I have a bunch of whammies against me. I've got the Hashimoto's against me. I've got an inactive lifestyle. I've got bone pain. I got no estrogen. So I work on my gut health, but there's other factors to osteoporosis. So it's overwhelming what it could be. Stress is a big thing too. It pulls from the bones. So let's walk through this slowly. Let's try to create some kind of plan at the end where we feel comfortable about this. So menopausal women, it's a big thing. Postmenopausal women, people with the family of a history of osteoporosis or fractures, they're more at risk. Individuals with small body frames, believe it or not, are more at risk. Hormonal imbalances, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, thyroid, and cortisol are more at risk because the osteoclast and the osteoblast are really sensitive to hormones. Unfortunately, those with digestive disorders are definitely more at risk. So leaky gut, anything, gastritis, reflux medications, all that stuff, celiac, Crohn's, non-celiac, food sensitivities are a big factor with osteoporosis. So getting a food sensitivity test is really, really big. Another thing that's big with osteoporosis is gut microbiome. And so you want to do a gut microbiome test for sure. Parasites, pathogens, viruses, but also what I'm about to get into is how vitamin D and K play into the gut is going to be what's called GLP-1. You guys may have heard GLP-1 through Ozempic and all that stuff, but really, and I'm going to do a podcast on GLP-1. You make it yourself. It's in your gut. And when it doesn't work properly, it creates chaos. So we're going to talk about that but gut health is super, super important here. Any type of inflammatory bowel disease or gastritis, diverticulitis, colitis, if you have those, you need to meet with me and get a grasp on those now. And I'm telling you right now, I know I meet with a lot of you and you don't do your follow-ups. That's not good. It's not a one and done thing. I hate to say it. You just can't do functional one and done. Your health is long term. Your health is, work on this, be proactive at all times. This thing, osteoporosis, sneaks up on you. Long-term steroid use isn't a good thing, and obviously sedentary lifestyle. So those are all things that would put you more at risk. Men can also develop osteoporosis. It's usually underdiagnosed with men, comes out later. They usually break something at later. Testosterone drops dramatically after their 50s, so that's another player in this. So some symptoms and warnings that you might want to think about beforehand. It's a silent kind of illness. Loss of height over time is a sign. That dowager's hump where you get that stoop posture, that's a sign that, because a lot of it is the spine. I'm a chiropractor, so a lot of the spine, that you're losing disc height, you're losing height in the bones. The vertebra can start becoming very weak and brittle. Pain in the back, you can get vertebral fractures, fractures from minor falls or injuries when you're younger. These are signs to take your bone health seriously. Also, bone pain. I'm not a real big proponent if you've got bone pain to just run and take medications, without trying to see what the cause of the bone pain was. If you have any of the things I just talked about, I don't want to keep repeating myself, it could be causing your bone pain. So you want to get down to the root cause, and that's all the way down for the gut pathogens. I said the gut microbiome problem, the food sensitivity problems, the inflammations, the chronic inflammation, the stress, hormone imbalances. Like these things actually can be causing your arthritis, your RA. I've had patients that do food sensitivity tests, they remove what comes out, and they're like, oh my gosh, my RA factors, my numbers are all good, I don't need the medications. So again, remember the medications aren't bad, but they do treat symptoms. They don't look for the cause of things. So the most common test for osteoporosis right now is the DEXA scan. I'm not going to get into the testing. I know that sometimes if they take an x-ray, they might see like osteopenia. There's so much about the testing. I just don't have the time for it. It's controversial, yes. It helps you understand why bone loss might be happening. It might give you like, hey, there's something going on here. You're going to want to start paying attention. But it's not a one and done. It's not like, and also with x-rays and things like that, it could be positioning. There's lots of things that could be going on with these scores. Same with mammographies. There's a lot there, and it doesn't mean, hey, you have this, you need to get your breasts off. Just mammographies need further testing. So there's kind of a screening for it. Let's get into the approach. Let's just get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about what you can do to protect and strengthen your bones. So I'm going to get into the nutrients. Minerals. Minerals are the main one, and it's just not calcium, because you have to be very careful with calcium. What I see in my practice is a lot of calcium ending up in the blood. And then they'll say, well, I got the test for my jugular, they checked my arteries out, and they're calcifying. So if you give yourself too much calcium and it doesn't go to the bone, it's going to end up in the bloodstream, and that's not a good thing either. So you have to be careful with calcium. I definitely would approach it with food. So the first thing for me, which we're going to talk about, is gut health, making sure you're eating foods that are high in calcium and that the body is absorbing that natural form of calcium. Not big into supplements. I'm really not. If you're going to functional and getting 12 supplements, be careful, because some of these supplements, we don't break down 100% of supplements. We have taken enough x-rays where we see supplements in the gut. You're absorbing maybe 30 to 40% of them. Again, there's different types. The liquid and the liposomals are a little bit different. Best to get calcium from your food. You need protein, but you need the other minerals with calcium. So calcium needs magnesium and zinc, right? Phosphorus, boron. You also need vitamin D with vitamin K. And you need trace minerals. The best place to get trace minerals is sea salt. 80 trace minerals in sea salt. Another thing that Japan does really well is iodine. We don't do that here. Another thing that Japan does very, very well is soy. We don't do that here. We've been taught that iodine is bad. We've been taught that soy is bad, right? We have been taught that we need to eat more vitamin and more calcium that you can possibly imagine. And what does Japan have? Fish oils, vitamin D, cod liver oil, stuff like that. Omegas are super, super important and anti-inflammatory. Their diet is phenomenal versus ours. So our diet isn't the main problem. Our gut absorbing. So the main problem with osteoporosis is the American diet. And then once we change that, and you say, oh no, I eat plant-based. I don't eat box foods. I'm very clean. I eat amazing. Okay, then you got to make sure your gut is absorbing the nutrients from the food. If you have to support anything, you would be supporting minerals. Sea salt has 80 trace minerals. It has to be raw, really good sea salt. Celtic sea salt, pink Himalayan sea salt, the rock, the actual real deal. Not the American refined processed crap. Not salt that's in all the processed foods. It's real salt. And so that's going to help give your body the trace minerals it needs, because it's not in a lot of the American food products. K is really important with D. You don't want to take D without K. I see that a lot in the practice. There are gut microbes. There are good bacteria in the gut that you need to metabolize K. So if those bacteria you don't have, or they're not doing well, if you have a gut dysbiosis, which means your gut microbiome has gut bacteria that are very good and healthy, you're born with them. And if the ones that are for K and the B vitamins have this too, by the way. If you don't have a robust amount of the K producing bacterias, you're going to have a problem with K. And that's one of the main deficiencies I see. I see more K deficiencies than D. I don't see magnesium deficiencies. I see vitamin B and I see Ks. And you know what? Vitamin Bs and vitamin K, they're the two vitamins that need the gut microbiome bacteria. There's specific gut microbiome bacteria in the gut for B vitamins and for K. So it comes down to leaky gut again. If your gut's not healthy, you may have a problem with your B vitamins, but you may have a problem with K. Now, here's the thing about K. You want to take K with D. Because if you take too much D, it's going to pull calcium, but you don't want D to send calcium to the blood. You want D to send calcium to the bone, and K helps that. So it's a mineral thing. You want to take a multi-mineral, and you also want to make sure that if you're taking D, you take it with K. Whole foods at all times. Just stop eating. I'm telling you, if you want to be healthy, get off the American food products. Get off Kellogg's products and Nabisco products and all the boxed and packaged aisles. Stop eating them. Just stop eating them. Your palate is gonna change, and you're not even gonna like them. They taste like chemicals when you go back to them. When people make me food or bring food over, or I go to their house and they serve us stuff, I can't even eat it, and I feel so rude, but I can't. It tastes, once you don't eat like Chips Ahoy cookies and Oreo cookies and the bread, oh my God, I would throw up. I can't even I do not walk down the bread aisle in food stores because you can smell the chemicals. Once you get that out of your system, you can't be near some of the stuff. I can't even, I used to eat that stuff. Trust me, I did. Whole foods, leafy greens, nuts, seeds, fish, and high quality protein are key. Vitamin D matters, but again, the best source is sun. And what do they tell you? Don't go in the sun. Put sunscreen on. Sunscreen, oh my gosh, please go to my blog and my podcast on sunscreen. I'm not going to get into it. It blocks vitamin D. So why are we so deficient in vitamin D when these other countries aren't? Now, are people in Japan and Italy laying out in the sun until they're sunburned? No, we're talking about just get in the sun. Morning sun is great. Afternoon sun is great. I just talked about this. I have patients that sit in the window, and they get my dad. We have this bay window, and he has this recliner near his window, and he reads books there, and he sits in the window in the sun and gets sun. You don't have to go to the beach and burn your skin. That's not the point. But sun is really the most important way to get vitamin D. These supplements are pretty bad. Vitamin D is not water soluble like a vitamin C. You just don't pee it out. So it's very, very important that you're not taking too much D in supplement form. I would say sun, and then I would go over to like your cod liver oil and your fishy, your omegas and things like that, and get it from food. So the next thing that's really important we touched upon is the strength and weight bearing exercises, exercising. Now, it's not hardcore exercising. This is where I want to address with you guys. As you're moving into the older years, can you look at it like, because this is where I am and I'm trying to do this, and I want to start some kind of method to help you guys and myself. You want to say to yourself, all right, I'm not 20, I can't maybe run, I used to run every day, and I moved to the beach, and I have the boardwalk here, and I used to drive over here to run the boardwalk, and now I'm like, oh my God, I live right here, and I can barely do it. My feet are killing me. Even walking is hard for my feet. What can I do? I've got to find a way that I stay active. Like when you think of the people in Japan, or even when I was in Italy, there was people Italy had so many steps, and these elders were doing it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm sitting there like trying to focus. What can I do to stay active? Now, if you live in a city, that's actually really good because you have to walk everywhere, and that's kind of how Italy was. You just walk everywhere to get something, so it keeps you active. When I went there, I think we walked 50 miles a day or something crazy, or was it something like that? 50 miles the whole trip? I don't even know. It was something crazy. We were walking. When I looked at the steps, I was like, we walked a lot, and I felt great. I never felt better being there, eating great, just great. So bring it back to here. What can we do here in our life, in our crazy lives, in our active lives when we're working, we're not on vacation? What can we do for exercising, walking, resistant training like light weights? I think that's where we want to go, women, because that keeps the skin taut. It keeps we lose muscle mass. This is what's happening in perimenopause and menopause is we're losing muscle mass. We're losing bone mass. The one thing about osteoporosis is people still have fractures that take vitamin D and and they take vitamin D, vitamin K, calcium. People still get fractures that take the medication for osteoporosis. And one of the thoughts in functional medicine of why they do is because you might be making the bone, let's say, more dense, but you're not making a quality of the matrix of the bone isn't strong. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like quality over quantity. You might be building more bone, but you're not making quality bone. So it's still brittle. It's still going to break, if that makes sense. So you might be laying down more. You might be giving the bone more things to make it more dense and heavier, but it's still brittle on the inside. Okay, and it still breaks. And that's very common. We see this as people on the medications, their scores change on the DEXA scan, but they still fracture. So that's what I want to talk about is when you do a little bit of light resistance training, you can start off with 2 pounds, and when that gets easy, you can move to, a 5-pounder, and when that's too easy, you can go to an 8-pounder, and when that's too easy, you can do 10. And I don't want you to be doing like major weight training. I don't want deadlifts, and I don't want you to do a bar over your neck. That's really bad. You can easily at an old age fracture a vertebra or blow a disc. But lightweight resistant training is one of the best. You could do the bands. One of the best things for women, for bone building, for preventing osteoporosis. But you're also not just going to prevent osteoporosis, you're also going to help keep the muscle mass on your body. Because what happens, women, is our skin starts sagging and then we lose the muscle and we get flabby and we get cellulite. And so that we start seeing that change dramatically. So I would say resistance training, walking I know helps. When I was younger, I used to see these couples just walk around our neighborhood, and now I'm 55, so these couples are in their 80s. And there's, I don't know, I left the neighborhood, I would say, about 15 years ago, but they were still walking. And they're still alive, and a lot of their family members aren't. And so the walking, I always said, because these were the walkers when I was younger, I was like, you would be leaving the neighborhood driving to school, and you would see this young couple walking. Like I could tell they'd come home from work or after dinner and they'd go for their walk. And I moved back to that neighborhood when I was getting married at 27, 28, and there they were still walking because they lived in the same house, and I lived there for a while and they were still walking. And some of the people we knew in their family passed away, but I think the walking has a lot to do with it. The people that really walk stay healthier. Yoga is actually one of those things too that help resist on the bone. So what does that mean when you keep saying resistant? You want to challenge the bone. You want to challenge the bone. When you challenge the bone, you're challenging those osteoblasts. They're the ones that are struggling. That dance between the two. The osteoclasts, sometimes people have problems with the osteoclasts, and that's the imbalance where both of them just aren't really doing their job and you get bone loss. But it's typically it's the osteoclasts are still there doing their job and the osteoblasts have slowed down. So there's this imbalance between those two. When you're placing stress on the bones, like say you're in a yoga pose and you're pushing down on the bones, or you're doing like a downward dog and you're pushing down with your hands, you're challenging those osteoblasts and you're helping with the bone building. Balance exercises, they all help stimulate bone formation. Now, balance exercises are actually really hard as you get older because you lose your balance. A lot to do with your vestibular too that's going on in the head. But balance exercises, I haven't started yet. My husband's actually really good at those, but they really, really help too from you falling, right? They really help that we lose that ability to know where we are in time and space. It's called proprioception. because of the joints. The joint receptors really are keeping you balanced. So here's a couple things that go on with falls is that the joint receptors, as you're younger, they really, really quickly know where you are in time and space. It's when you're a kid, you're like a monkey. You could literally you could fall off a playground thing and bounce right back up and go. One, your bones are healthy, so they don't really break. And two, it's just kind of like you're just kind of like, it could be you fall and then you roll into a cartwheel and you go back onto a swing. It's like crazy. Your body really knows where it is appropriate in time and space. It has a really good sense of balance. And of course, the bones aren't brittle. So as you get older, that all kind of goes away and gets bad. So keep your balance. So yoga really tries to help with that. But there's also other exercises that you can do for balance. Be careful with the boards, and my husband gets on those boards, but they're really hard to do at first. Go slow with balance, but that really helps with falls as well. Estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, they all affect bone health. You want to address these imbalances. You want to get down to what could be the root causes of these. We've talked about these on other podcasts. Your gut health is really, really, really important here because this is about absorption and it's about the GLP-1, which we're going to talk about right now. So you want to make sure that gut health, which I talked about, is absorbing the nutrients that the bones needs and the minerals and the vitamins, all that stuff. In the gut, there is going to be something called GLP-1, and it's glucagon-like peptide. That's what the GLP means, glucagon-like peptide. It's a hormone produced by the cells that line the small intestine, so they're in the gut wall, in the gut lining, right? And this is what I do. I do leaky gut work. It's one of several hormones that regulates your desire to eat. And it's produced in the digestive tract, and it helps stimulate the release of insulin from the pancreas. So when you eat, your intestinal cells release this GLP-1, and it signals the brain to register feelings of fullness. So when you eat, you should be able to eat a good amount, the right amount, not a lot, not too much. You should be able to eat a healthy meal, and then the intestinal cells will release GLP-1, and you'll feel full, which makes you stop eating. In patients with dysbiosis or a gut imbalance, that's when the gut microbiome is off. You have certain families of bacteria overgrowing and certain undergrowing, and you have this sick gut, this leaky gut. What happens is that the formation of GLP-1 declines, and this can cause obesity. I'm sorry, this is like a 40-minute conversation, but I really want to get into GLP-1, and I'm going to actually do a podcast on this. So the reduction of the GLP-1, we know it causes obesity, and it's seen often with leaky gut, but it's also been linked to osteoporosis. So that's where I find that fascinating. And this is because GLP-1 activates vitamin D, it stimulates the osteoblast formation, and it reduces something called rankle. It reduces the release of rankle. RANKL. Now, rankle is, when that's released, it lowers the osteoclast and the osteoblast activity. If you have a leaky gut, your GLP-1 is probably low, and it's depressing the activation of vitamin D. And this is why we find a lot of low vitamin D when we test people. And they keep changing the range, and they keep over supplementing people with vitamin D when you really need to get down to the root cause of leaky gut. Also, they just now are putting everybody on Ozempic. So, and really just going to mess up the gut even more. So this is really, really kind of a problem, I think. What is rankle? Rankle is something that is about your immune system. So it's like kind of activation of the immune system is how I can explain it best for lack of time, but it's inflammatory. So it's like, there's your gut inflammation. The next step is really to reduce the inflammation and the amount of toxins in the body. So you want to reduce your toxic load. Toxins can cause osteoporosis, again, maybe affecting the gut first, then the bones. We don't know, but we're talking about, parasites, pathogens, gut bacteria, viruses, overgrowth of yeast, mold toxins, limes. These toxins just could be also toxins that you're putting on your body. So your skincare, your makeup, your lotions, your shampoos, also could be what you're drinking and what you're eating. So a lot of that is really about toxic load and toxic pathogens. So your fall preventions are best by eating clean, managing your stress, right? Tackling your gut health and making sure that your gut is healthy. So your food sensitivities, your gut microbiome, and then, also work on balance exercises. Working on your vision checks too. Keep up with your vision. Also, I'm really big about orthotics. I can't say it enough. I'm trying to bring it into the practice right now. Orthotics are life-changing. Now, I've been wearing mine that are too long, and I've noticed that could be the problem of my foot. If your foot has, our feet, they as you age, they collapse, right? There are a bunch of bones in the feet that as you age, it's just going to change form and kind of collapse on you. And when it does, if they roll in, your knees will roll in. If they roll out, your knees will roll out. If they're a little off and not fully rolling, like half rolling, it's going to affect your knee. When the knee moves and you're trying to walk on a knee that's not aligned, you're going to ruin your knee. Same with your hip. If your foot and your knee are not aligned, your hip is going to be out of its position slightly. And when you walk, you're walking with a hip that is over grinding and you're going to lose your hip. So a lot of these things, the foot, the hip, and the knee are connected. And orthotics really, really help. They'll also prevent from falling because you're going to fall when you have a rotated foot or rotated knee or rotated hip, And a lot of these knee replacements and hip fractures and hip replacements are coming from spinal problems, also foot problems. So I really would address seeing a chiropractor for, foot, knee, hip, spine, but also podiatrists, or if chiropractors sell, get really good orthotics. What I'm talking about is you actually getting the orthotic made to your foot. Okay, so conventional medicine often uses medications and other agents to reduce risk fractures, and it could be helpful, of course, for some people, those that may be at really, really high risk and need help. But it's important to discuss that you have other things to do, and it's important to address that this is a silent thing that sneaks up on you, and there's lifestyle approaches that you can do. It's common, but it's not inevitable part of aging. And just because your mom had it doesn't mean you're going to have it, because there's so much you can do to protect your bones, build strength, and reduce fracture risk. If you're concerned about bone health, talk with your health care practitioner about the screening, but also, come to me and we can really dive in and create an individualized plan. But what I would love to do is really work on the gut health, because that's where it all starts. I want to thank you for listening. I do apologize. I went way over this one, but it's such a huge topic. It's a misunderstood topic greatly. And to summarize it, it's about the minerals. It's definitely about some of the vitamins. It really is about the osteoclast versus the osteoblast. That's the story. And you want to dive deep into the gut health and any other possibilities that can be causing osteoporosis now or in the future. And that is the goal. Okay, I want to thank you for listening. If this episode helped you, share it with someone else who needs to hear it, and I will definitely see you at the next episode.